Genlock was Rooster Teeth's 3D animated, mecha-inspired bonanza featuring the voice talents of Michael B. Jordan, Maisie Williams, and Dakota Fanning. Oh, and of course, who can forget David Tennant, which is kind of a score for Rooster Teeth, right? I mean, before this, I'd come across their site maybe once or twice. I'd heard their name associated with a couple of things, like this thing called Ruby, but I didn't really know anything about that, and, you know, I'm not really interested in that kind of thing. But they've obviously gone to quite some effort with this, probably in the hopes to boost their platform's profile. And I'm going to look at both seasons, and perhaps the comic book if I get the time. So Genlock is set in 2068 as a powerful international dictatorship, or more accurately an autocracy, called the Union is gradually expanding and taking over city by city, with another international alliance called the Polity being the only thing opposing them. The whole thing starts out in New York with this guy called Chase. He's visiting his family, and I say visiting, but he's actually hologramming in when New York is attacked and he's called into duty. We find out that he's a fighter pilot for the Vanguard, which I guess is the Polity's military, flying one of these awesome jets. But he gets shot down and presumably killed, and New York falls and is lost. Weirdly enough, Chase's family don't really get mentioned again, presumably being killed by the Union, but it's just a bit odd that Chase never goes, what happened to my mom? What happened to my sister? Like, I missed them, you know, at any point. Anyway, at this stage, we don't know anything about the Union, who they are, what their motives are. All we see are these armored soldiers backed up by these Clone Wars style walkers and controlling these clouds of black smoke that turn out to be clouds of nanobots. These are pretty terrifying. You see soldiers in their mechs quickly trying to seal up cracks in their windshields, only for the nanobots to find ways through anyway, and then it cuts away. So I guess the nanobots like crawl into their body through any orifice they can find, and I hate that shit. I thought that was pretty cool, you know, if you think about how nanobots are used by Tony Stark to be these magical things that can just form whatever. Need a new arm? No problem. Need a new leg? No problem. You need a massive rail gun with loads of complicated moving parts? No problem. We can sort that for you. But in reality, they'd probably have some pretty scary uses too. Anyway, the show cuts to 4 years later, and Professor Rufus Weller from the Experimental Science Unit, or ESU, who's been experimenting with digitizing and uploading the human mind into these humanoid mechs called Holons, 40-foot robots that have way better capabilities than the current standard of technology. For the most part, the current standard of technology seems to be, you know, people in walking tanks, you know, piloting them with joysticks and sliders and stuff. They have these very cool hover jets, like I mentioned before, as well as the Union having these massive walking behemoths. But before the Holons, the most advanced thing that we see are those clouds of nanobots. This process of connecting the human mind with the Holon is called Genlock. And of course, they've been keeping what's left of our guy Chase alive in a tank, who, when he's not piloting mechs, can seemingly project a hologram of himself wherever he damn well chooses. Chase is the first of a carefully selected team of young individuals who Prof. Weller has picked out because of their various traits that make them gen compatible. You see, not everyone is, and if you're not, your brains are going to be getting scrambled. Apparently it's to do with your nervous system and neuroplasticity, which I'm not sure that's a real thing. Now, unlike Pacific Rim Uprising, where it felt a little odd that teenagers could suddenly pilot these insanely complex machines, there's a specific reason why it especially has to be teenagers to control these mechs. And I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it's to do with the fact that when you reach adulthood, your brain stops producing stuff, and this whole process specifically needs stuff because reasons. What I'm trying to say is that at least there's a reason we got kids at the wheel of experimental tech that could be the whole difference in a war where thousands of lives hang in the balance. And I'm sure Pacific Rim Uprising tried to talk its way around this, like in The Black. They had no choice, so that's one thing. But I can't quite recall off the top of my head what their reasoning was in Uprising. But regardless, the way it's presented here, the way it's put forward to the audience here, it feels a little bit better than what we had in Uprising. Anyway, back to Genlock. As a consequence of all this age stuff, you can actually age out, which means that you can get too old, right? Once a candidate gets too old, they will no longer be able to Genlock. Professor Weller picks out this guy Kazu to be the Red Ranger, Cameron to be the Green Ranger, Valentina to be the Purple Ranger, Yaz to be the Yellow one, and Chase is the Blue guy. Well, one of the two blue guys, because there's also this other guy called Sinclair, which is odd, right? You know, two blue guys? I smell a rat. Oh no, there you go. This guy turns out to be a spy for the Union. Now, the new recruits have these suits that are bulletproof and enhance their movement and speed and agility and everything. So this martial art combat fight scene right here is pretty cool. He is beating up a woman, but there's nothing wrong with that. Oh no, wait, there is. Sinclair is on a mission to hijack one of the Holons and take it back to the Union so they can analyze it and make their own ones, I guess. But of course, this guy is not Genlock compatible. So long story short, he gets into one of the pods to upload his mind into the Holon, but of course, because he's not compatible, scramble time. From there, the recruits embark on the standard training routines we've seen so many times in this type of thing. But they're in these kind of protoform Holons, stripped down, beginner Holons. Think of them as mech with training wheels without weapons or armor. And I really like how it looks like there's some kind of muscle structure under here, intermixed with all the mechanical parts. It's here that Prof. Weller tells them about the catch. Well, fuck me, there's a catch. Which is what they call uptime. The time that they stay uploaded is limited. So they can only stay Genlocked for a certain amount of time before their neural image is changed by the process and they'll become incompatible with their human nervous system and they'll be stuck in the Holon and unable to return to their real bodies. Now remember this because it'll come into play later. Professor Weller also tells them about overclocking, which is how they can temporarily enhance their machines, but at the expense of uptime. Another thing the prof explains is that when they're uploaded, they'll be able to link their minds together. A good example of this is in one fight where the green Holon has its head ripped off, but is able to connect to the yellow one and use its vision to see where the enemy is. There's some really good use of this too, but I'll come back to that later. Now, it's at this stage that I was thinking, the human characters aren't quite as annoying as they can be in this kind of thing. Although I did have the feeling that this show is definitely trying to tick the inclusivity box, which is never a problem for me as long as the characters are fully formed and, again, not annoying. But then we get a really ridiculously long team building scene where they all go into VR and discuss gender fluidity, and it doesn't need to be there. Anyway, like I said, I don't really have a problem with any of these issues being in here as long as they are kind of part of the overall thing and the thing doesn't go on too long. This just went on a bit too long and it stood out a bit too much for me. Anyway, there's an alarm and the Union is staging an attack. So with barely enough training, the recruits are thrown in at the deep end, with Chase and Yaz being the most experienced of the group, tasked with overseeing the mission. It's here that they meet this guy, the Union's Dark Holon. It's got 4 arms tipped with razor-sharp claw-like fingers and a triangular head with a single glowing red dot at its center, with a set of Skull's teeth, which I can only imagine being for dramatic effect. But on top of all of this, it controls a cloud of nanobots and forms a bubble around the entire battle scene. It holds its own against at least 2 Holons by itself before being hit by a sniper bolt and fleeing. And I absolutely love this guy, but again, I'm going to talk about my opinions on it a little bit later. So the girl piloting the green Holon, called Cammy, incidentally, she's the one voiced by Arya Stark, Maisie Williams. Because of her encounter with this dark Holon, she starts having flashbacks and PTSDs about her encounter with the mysterious bot. And it's here that we see how, when uploaded, these guys could almost treat their mind as software and enter it like a digital VR space. And their memories, they can treat like a file system and choose to delete certain memories. And I thought that was pretty neat. Anyway, next they're given a mission to attack a Union manufacturing base in Atlanta, where we're told that this is the first time that the Vanguard have been able to go on the front foot against the Union in years, and that they've been having to play defense since the war began. Ignoring Professor Weller's concern about dispatching the kids so quickly after their first battle, the team is given additional upgrades. So Kazu, the red one, gets a new sword, Valentina, the sniper, gets a new rifle, Yaz, the yellow one, gets new wrist-mounted lasers, and Cammy, the green one, gets these targeting drones, which I love, by the way. And of course, Chase, being that he used to be a pilot, gets these very cool looking wings for aerial combat. So they go in, they rescue some hostages, but the evil mystery Union bot shows up again and seems to recognize Chase and even speaks in a voice that sounds very similar to his, before eventually being backed into a corner and fleeing. Again, you get the feeling from this fight scene that if this thing really wanted to, it could take on 2, 3, possibly even 4 Holons by itself. And like last time, it was only really beaten back here because of a sniper bolt from distance from Valentina. Confronted with the possibility that there might be 2 Chases, Professor Weller reveals that it is another version of Chase, a dark version. And yes, they refer to him as his nemesis. Love it. And that has got to be a reference to Nemesis Prime, don't you think? Now, apparently this whole situation has occurred because the Vanguard had been making backup copies of Chase's mind, and the Union somehow managed to get a hold of a copy. But before you can say who the fuck's the original, the Union attack the Anvil alongside the Nemesis mech, who angrily demands that the Union kill the copy. Apparently the Union promised him that not only would they kill Chase, but they would reunite the Nemesis version with Chase's body. Apparently being disconnected from his body for so long has turned him him kinda loopy and dark and evil. Chase jumps in to combat the Nemesis mech, and the battle begins, and the Union quickly breaches the anvil and makes a play for the Genlock kids' physical bodies, forcing them to retreat. It's here that Professor Weller is forced to sacrifice himself, but luckily there's a copy of his consciousness in his Caliban droid. Now when I say a copy of his consciousness, I don't think it's like artificially intelligent, like it can't think creatively, it can't form new memories. I think it's just a copy and a backlog of all his memory and knowledge. So it's not like he just goes on living in the body of a droid. Anyway, the kids manage to escape on a ship, and they manage to take down the Union's behemoth walker. But before it succumbs completely, it releases a massive cloud of nanobots that kills everyone left behind in the anvil. So the loss of Professor Weller, the anvil, and potentially the entire Vanguard army is a pretty heavy one to bear as the group go on the run. But every time they have to stop for food or fuel or whatever, the Union seems to be able to find them every time and catch up with them. And it turns out that they're able to track them because evil Chase is still in the digital world with them and able to track them through that. Eventually the group meet up with Professor Weller's ex-wife and fellow scientist, who was involved somehow in the development of the Holons, so obviously knows a lot about them. So long story short, Team Genlock make an agreement with her and this guy to go and hunt down the rogue Nemesis Mech. So the yellow Holon gets wings too. Kazu'S, the red one, is based on his favorite manga Robo Shogun and has an altogether bulkier and heavier appearance, and Cammy, the green one, is redesigned to look like a rabbit. It is cute. The purple one gets a cloak that gives her invisibility. Then this engineer gets on the phone and tells them that actually the anvil and everyone in it is actually safe. And how did they survive the cloud of nanobots, you may ask? Well, apparently Professor Weller here realized that the Union troops were given a chip so that the nanotech could differentiate between Union and Vanguard. And he developed a signal to mimic the chip that would fool the nanobots. Anyway, at this stage, the Union attacks Chicago and the team are sent in, and soon after engaging the Union, Nemesis is drawn to them and shows off his upgrade. He can fly at supersonic speeds now. He has 4 extra spider-like limbs, as well as upgraded nanotech that patch and repair any damage. Group Genlock try mind-sharing to beat Nemesis, and as I said before, this means that they burn through their uptime and pretty quickly have to go back to their physical bodies for downtime and to recover. This, of course, leaves them completely defenseless, so Chase volunteers to stay in his Holon at the expense of never being able to re-enter his physical body. Nemesis quickly becomes aware of the gang being vulnerable, and realizing how much they mean to Chase, decides to make offing them his #1 priority. So he traps Chase under a tower while he goes to kill their RIL bodies. But luckily, one of the soldiers from the Vanguard who we saw earlier turns up in the Holon that was designed for Sinclair, even though he's not compatible, so it's doing massive damage to his mind the whole time. And it's interesting that this guy was able to hold on for so long, whereas Sinclair, it cooked his brain immediately. Anyway, this new guy in his Holon doesn't last long in combat at all, but does manage to buy a precious few more seconds for Chase to free himself while the gang manage to get back moving again with their mechs. And it's here that Chase realizes that now he doesn't have the uptime limit to worry about, that he can overclock himself as much as he wants. I actually feel like they could have pushed that idea further than they did. I would have loved to have seen what his mech could do when pushed as far as it could go. But basically, Nemesis fights back and then the other Holons show up in support, so you never really get to see what it can do when pushed to its absolute limit. Anyway, Chase tells the guys that the reason that Nemesis became the way that he is that he was cut off from his body for too long, suggesting that this will eventually happen to him as well. But Cammy tells him that it was also because he was left isolated for too long, whereas as long as Chase has friends, that won't ever happen to him. Yay, friends! It's a trope that's a little on the cheesy side, but I'll let it slide. The group all mind-share together, and using each other's senses and abilities, absolutely pummel Nemesis, both in the real world and in the digital mind space. Then each Holon taking a turn to rip a chunk out of him before Chase flies up to the stratosphere with him and drops him to the ground. And before the digital body of Nemesis dies, he tells Chase that there are more copies of him out there that he's gonna have to deal with. Chase buries a sword in the Nemesis mech's chest, and Bob's your uncle, Maisie's your auntie, and Countess Elizabeth Bathory III is your cousin who's never been quite the same since she met that guy who was into vampire roleplay. So overall, I really like Genlock. As the show's makers have stated, there are definite influences from Gundam, Ghost in the Shell, and stuff like that, but we're not into blatant rip-off territory either, at least it's not as far as I'm aware. If you're a hardcore anime or mecha fan, this might seem pretty lightweight, but to me, it hit a pretty decent balance. And there was a lot of things I liked. Like, I really like how the mind linking enabled them not only to use each other's senses, but also sync up their movements and perform crazy attacks. At one point, Cammy and Kazu link minds, and if I remember correctly, both of them are like flying through the air. One of them throws a sword, the other guy kicks the sword down on top of the bad guy and cuts off his arm with it. As I mentioned before, I really like that martial arts sequence enhanced by the gen suits. And overall, I really love the Holon design. You know I love to talk about creature and vehicle and robot design, right? So I really like these guys overall. The protoform versions were suitably like skeletal, like I guess is what I'm trying to say, like really elongated and lightweight and therefore kind of fragile. I really liked how they talked about how Cammy, who was the smallest of the group, was ill at ease controlling her bot because her proportions were wrong for her. And I touched on this in my Atlantic Rim review, how to me it's never really made sense to have the pilots, especially if they're piloting with a neural interface, in the chest. To me, it makes much more sense for them to be in the head, where proportionally all the limbs of the robot are in corresponding positions to the way they would be in real life. Anyway, someone in the comments, I think it might have been Beats, said that Gundam and probably many others have con pods in the chest and wherever the fuck, so maybe this is just me. To be honest, I haven't seen a lot of Gundam. It's just one of those shows that just seems like it's been going for so long, there's so many different strands of storyline that I've never known where is a good entry point. So Beats kindly recommended Iron-Blooded Orphans as a good entry point, so I'm starting to watch that very soon. Anyway, back to the Holon design. The one version that I didn't really like was this version, which definitely has armor at this point, but no, I don't know, no flair, I guess. And that might be the entire point, but they just look a little yawn to me. The final versions look fucking awesome though. I love the bulkiness of Kazu'S mech. I love the wings on the yellow one. I always love when wings are more like bird's wings or angel wings for no practical reason at all. They just look cool. I love the bunny bot skating around, getting real low to get under things and scooting between things real quick. I would have loved to have seen the sniper bot get a couple more interesting features. The invisibility cloak was cool, and a sniper rifle felt really powerful. It really like smashed Nemesis back when it hit him. But I don't really remember her doing a lot else. As I said before, I really like how they use the mind sharing in this. We've seen that a couple of times before, you know, like we've seen Unimines, we've seen the Drift in Pacific Rim, but I thought the way they used it here was really cool. The human characters were okay, but didn't stand out as hugely annoying, but not hugely likable either, you know, just functional. That's fine. I really want to talk about Nemesis, but I think I might have to do that in another video. I think I'll dedicate a whole video just to Nemesis by itself, because this video is getting pretty long. So what else did I like? I like the fact that each Holon is constantly evolving and getting new features. Like, I did set out to give you a concise list of which Holon has got which weapon, but actually it gets pretty confusing. Like, Genlock doesn't have a roll call the same way that Pacific Rim does.
Crimson Typhoon, China.
And what that means is that you gradually get to know each bot as the whole thing goes along. And I really like that, you know, I really like that these things are presented as a little surprise here and there, and that the pilots are having to learn about their robots in the field, rather than laying it all out on a plate beforehand. At the end of it all, Chase is left without a physical body, which I initially thought would mean that he could no longer leave the Holon at all, but of course I was forgetting that he can project his hologram pretty much anywhere he wants. And although the general says they'll closely have to monitor him in his new state, really the fact that he lost his physical body doesn't really seem that it was of any great consequences. He was just like, well, fuck that limp carcass in the jar, I'm off to Tijuana. I don't know, something about that didn't really sit right with me. I think maybe because I was left feeling like, well, maybe he should have left his physical self to die a long time ago. So yeah, there you have it. I really like Genlock. Might have said that already. So I would give it an 8, maybe an 8.5 out of 10. Loses a few marks just because the animation in places is a little jilted and a little strange. But a big thing for me is that the passion of the people who made it, their passion for the genre is evident, and that's huge. Anyway, guys, there's more that I want to say, but I really don't think that many people are going to make it this far into the video, so I think I have to leave it there. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to see my review of Season 2. It might take me a little while before I get around to it, unless this video does particularly well, of course, in which case I'll bump it up the list. But for now, it's time for me to take my meds, so until the next one, let me invite you to get out of my head, and I'll see you very soon for the next one. Thank you very much for watching, and cheerio, bye!